Ladies and gentlemen, a cordial welcome to the Wienerberger press conference on the occasion of the presentation of the 2014 results. It's great to see so many of you here, although on February 16 we already communicated our preliminary results. CEO Heimo Scheuch and CFO Willy van Riet will present the results for 2014 and give you an outlook to 2015. Afterwards, there will be an opportunity for you to put questions. Please make sure to use a microphone when you put questions so that those following the webcast can hear you. And with this, I'd like to hand over to Heimo Scheuch. Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Klaus said last week, we already communicated our preliminary results through an ad hoc disclosure. We also referred to the non-recurring impairments there. So we can rather be brief today and allow enough time for questions. 2014 in operational terms was a highly satisfactory year. Our revenues increased by 6%, reaching a record level in the history of the company, just over 2.8 billion. Operating EBITDA increased by 19% to 317 million. Clay building materials in Europe performed very well in a difficult and challenging environment. We achieved satisfactory growth rates in terms of volume and also in terms of prices. Cost optimization measures taken in recent years within the framework of our restructuring programs contributed to these good results. As regards pipes and pavers in Europe, Steinzeug and Semmelrock contributed to our results. In 2014, we pointed out several times that the international project business of Pipelife is a high-margin business, but was a bit weaker in 2014. So therefore, a decline in the results generated by Pipelife, but that was compensated by Semmelrock and Steinzeug. In North America, we had a dynamic market environment. We didn't see the growth rates in new housing starts that had been forecast in the United States, but we saw some growth and we were able to increase our revenues by a double-digit figure in the brick segment. But in North America, we had a challenging price environment throughout the year. Very briefly, the highlights in 2014. Our restructuring program, the program which we had initiated in 2012, was completed in 2014. 50 million savings had been our target. This target was fully reached. 17 million of that accounted for by savings in 2014. So there will be no further restructuring measures in the Wienerberger group to be implemented. An important milestone, I would call it a strategic milestone, was the complete takeover of the Tondach group. We were able to take over a successful and well-positioned company in Central and Eastern Europe. The company has been fully integrated and it made a contribution to revenues of more than 80 million and 15 million to EBITDA. And we are in the process of integrating this business, which will allow us to position ourselves more strongly in the renovation market in Central and Eastern Europe. As regards financing and the financing structure of the group, we were able to exchange 272 million into a new hybrid bond. So we have successfully restructured there, and we were able to renew and extend the credit line to 400 million. Despite the takeover of Tondach, we were able to further reduce our debt. We are now at a ratio of net debt to operating EBITDA of 1.9, which is well below our target of 2.5. The fourth quarter was a strong quarter. The full year 2014 was quite varied. We had a good start with a mild winter. The second quarter was not too good, not too bad. Third quarter rather bad, but fourth quarter was very good again. In operational terms, growth in volume and results in all divisions. As regards the non-recurring impairment charges, we already communicated that last week, 208 million in total. These impairments are all due to investments and takeover transactions made before 2009 under entirely different market conditions, in a different economic environment. For us, it was important to adjust to new market conditions, to the technical and regulatory conditions. Impairment charges were 100 million impairment of assets and 107 million goodwill impairment, mostly in the United States. So the good operating result of Wienerberger is clear. If we hadn't had these impairment charges, we would have had a positive operating result after the hybrid bond. One more point about the impairment charges. Because of the strong operating performance and the strong free cash flow, we've decided to propose an increase of our dividend from 12 to 15 cents per share. That is an increase by 25%. We're going to propose that to the AGM, and we are committed to our dividend policy. It's not inscribed in stone, but nevertheless we are making a clear statement that Wienerberger intends to distribute dividends related to the free cash flow, because that is an indication of the fact that a company is managing its business well. So we intend to distribute dividends within the range of 10 to 30% of the free cash flow. By way of summary, revenues 2.8 billion, operating EBITDA 317 million, net debt 621 million, and total investments, including Tondach, 163 million. Let me go into some detail about the impairment charges. In the United States, the region that accounts for the biggest part, we still take it that the American market will grow, but it will grow more slowly than forecast, not only by ourselves, but also by public authorities. Our target is we're aiming at 1.5 million housing starts in the U.S. market, and considering the market environment, it's something that can be reached, but not so quickly. So the potential in terms of EBITDA is 60 million. Our organization is targeted at that figure. And if we consider the price pressure in the regional market and longer-term slower growth, this means that we have a we had to book a goodwill impairment of 85 million and impairment charges to assets of 15 million. These 15 million relate to plants that were closed down and that will not be started up again. We don't need them in terms of capacity. Our structure is sufficient. So we have taken this step, and beyond that, we've also taken measures to strengthen our earnings in sales, in distribution, and in production. Germany is a market in the European context is lagging behind in terms of profitability. It's the worst performance in Europe, and there's been a decline in 1- and 2-family home construction in Germany because Germany tends to focus on multi-story buildings in urban areas, and therefore the brick volume required is much lower. So we had to adjust the valuation of assets by 34 million. We assume that we will reach an acceptable level of profitability in Germany thanks to the measures which we are currently taking, a stronger focus on high-quality products, that is perlite filled bricks, mineral wool filled bricks, and also measures regarding roof tiles and pavers. So the measures have been initiated and they will be implemented to increase profitability in Germany. Italy was a market that suffered a drastic decline in 2014, and the decline will continue this year. A short-term turnaround is not to be expected. The brick industry in Italy is suffering from excess capacity, and companies are closing down. We have adjusted our product mix. Our locations in northern Italy are high-performing locations, well endowed with raw materials, and we are confident that we can make the business in Italy profitable again in the coming years. But impairment charges in the amount of 44 or 45 million had to be booked. Other impairment charges mostly concern Russia and neighboring markets, that is our operations that supply products to Russia, that is Estonia and Finland, mostly facing bricks, but also Russia itself, considering the current economic situation and the devaluation of the ruble. About 2% of our revenues, group revenues, are accounted for by Russia, and last year we had a good contribution from Russia. So in operational terms, the business is going well, but we just have to wait and see. It's difficult to tell how Russia is going to develop this year. Pipelife in France is a special case, a downturn in public investment activity, an upswing or a recovery is not in sight, therefore an adjustment to market expectations. So we took that step at the end of last year to adjust to new market conditions. As regards the results by segment, bricks, 1.1 billion revenues, 156 million EBITDA contribution. In Western Europe, 408 million revenues in Eastern Europe and contribution to EBITDA 67 million. A very acceptable performance also in Eastern Europe. In pipes and pavers, in Western Europe, project business, high-margin project business was not particularly good in 2014. It will be better in 2015, and a satisfactory performance in Eastern Europe. North America is not yet where we would like to be, but we are making progress as regards revenues and also costs. The margin in the individual segments, 12%. In the wall segment, a slight improvement. The roof segment, highly satisfactory with an EBITDA margin of 22%. Facing bricks, 11%. The United States is lagging behind in this respect. Europe is quite satisfactory, particularly the United Kingdom, Belgium, and to a growing extent also the Netherlands. Pavers, 11%, doing very well considering the market situation, and pipes, 9%, and that's to do with the project business. But generally a very positive market situation. Now I'd like to hand over to Willi. Well, organic growth has been mentioned a couple of times. As you know, we focus on organic growth. And when you look at our revenue increases in 2014, you can see that half of that is accounted for by organic growth and the other half by the acquisition of Tondach. Organic growth comprises a 3% volume increase, despite the fact that we have difficult markets in Europe, and an average price increase of 1%. We have at the same time, however, a foreign exchange effect, which is rather a currency translation effect of -1%. That's the Norwegian crown, the Swedish crown. The ruble, of course, has a role to play there, particularly towards the end of the year. And this is compensated by pound sterling and the US dollar. So it's not really significant, -1%. A 6% increase, including organic volume growth. Our average prices in clay building materials in Western Europe, thanks to dynamic growth in the United Kingdom, and despite a declining market in France, Italy, and the Netherlands, we've succeeded in increasing our prices by a percentage which is higher than that of cost inflation. Eastern Europe, we have a stable to slight improvement of average prices. In Eastern European markets, the only growth there happened in Poland, so it's a rather good performance. Our product mix plays an important role in this respect because we focus on high-value premium products, and that results in an improvement of our prices. In North America, we began to feel a pressure on prices at the end of 2013, and that pressure has been maintained throughout 2014. We hadn't expected such a price pressure, but we had to react to it, and we didn't want to lose market shares. In fact, we even won additional market shares, but our average prices are lower. In an environment of growing volumes, we wouldn't have expected that, but you have to react to market conditions. In pipe life, as you know, there is a lot of volatility in raw material prices. There is the crude oil price, ethylene is produced from crude oil, and then PVC. PVC prices do not fluctuate as much as crude oil prices, nor do ethylene prices, because there is a processing step involved, and our price management has been quite successful. We are following these developments in a short-term perspective and making continuous adjustment. Now I move on to the income statement. 6% increase in revenues to 2.8 billion. Operating EBITDA up to 317 million. The acquisition of Tondach accounts for 15 million of that. So in organic terms, we've grown by 13% from 266 to 302. So this is a result of cost savings, and it's the result of organic development. So organically speaking, we are in a strong position. EBITDA margin 11.2% compared with 10% last year. Depreciation 217 million, slightly higher through the acquisition of Tondach. Operating EBIT before special items, 100 million compared with 55 million in 2013. And then impairment charges, impairment of assets and goodwill impairment, as Mr. Scheich explained. In 2013, we had this antitrust issue in Germany. We provisioned for that. And we were able to release that provision in 2014. So that results in an EBIT of minus 107 million after 208 million impairment compared with 64 million last year. A few words about the sale of non-operating assets. I don't want to elaborate on that. We always have approximately 10 million contribution to EBITDA from sales of real estate. This year, only 8.4 million. Last year, it was 11.9 million. So we are continuously disposing of our non-operating assets. If you add it up, 36 million of 100 million proceeds have already been generated. 100 million is our target, and we've already communicated that in 2015, 16, and perhaps even 2017, projects will be coming up. We're confident that we can make the 100 million by 2016, but it's not something we must do at any cost. If we don't get the right price for our real estate, we won't give anything away. We have a couple of things in the pipeline, but we want to get the right price for what we are selling. But we're confident that we can make the 100 million target. Profit after tax, 170 million. EBIT minus 107. A small contribution from investments in associates, almost the same as last year. The only thing under this item as of the 31st of December 2014 is Schlagmann, a company in which we have a 50% investment, and half a year of Tondach. Tondach was fully consolidated as of the 1st of July. Interest income, 8 million. Interest expense, 61 million. Other financial result, 5.5 million. This is positive. When you take a majority position in an existing company, according to IFRS, you have to make a valuation adjustment an upward adjustment in the 50% portfolio. So 23 million are accounted for that value adjustment according to IFRS. So we have a financial result of minus 50 million compared with minus 67 million the year before. Profit before tax minus 157. Income taxes have gone up from 4 to 12 million. Why is that so? The non-recurring goodwill and asset impairments are not tax deductible. It really depends on the country. In some countries we are profitable and therefore we have to pay taxes. Countries like Norway, Switzerland, Belgium, and we're paying taxes there. And this is reflected in this figure. We can't offset all the profits and losses of the group. We don't have such a system. We're not McDonald's or Amazon who can do that. We can't. Our plants are in the countries they operate in, and we generate our results in these countries, and we are subject to local tax law. So profit after tax minus 170 without the non-recurring impairments, even after the hybrid bond of 32.5 million, we would have a slightly positive result in 2014. So it's a strong message that goes out. We are on the right way. And as you can see here in the EBITDA bridge, clay building materials in Western Europe and in Eastern Europe contribute strongly to the results. Pipes and pavers, Western Europe are declining because in Western Europe we have the long, large diameter pipes, mostly in Norway, and the Soluforce pipes, pipes for the oil and gas industry in the Netherlands. And in 2014, these plants were working almost to full capacity. In 2014, we had fewer such projects. This is really project business, and we supply products to major projects in Ghana, for example. We supply pipes for seawater desalination plants or sewage plants. We had no such projects in 2014. That is a small project business, but it generates a very high margin. We didn't have that in 2014 in Western Europe. The other markets performed well, except for France and the Netherlands. In Eastern Europe, plus 7.5 in pipes and pavers. Heimo will tell you more about the segments later on. A strong performance of the group there as well. North America, here we felt the weakness of the Canadian market. We had a difficult beginning of the year along the East Coast because of the hard winter. This is why we've got a minus there, and holding and others, we were also able to make some savings. So altogether, 317.2 million EBITDA, plus 19% in organic terms without Tondach. Plus 13%. Cash flow development is important. Cash flow, 225 million, that is plus 37%. Working capital, a small cash out, but relative to revenues, it remains at a level of 20% of revenues. Normal capex 121, not what we had communicated in our guidance, slightly less, because we postponed some projects to 2014, divestments 36.9. So we have a free cash flow of 130 million, growth capex 18 million, and we paid out in terms of dividend and hybrid coupon 57.3 million. More than 2013, because when we exchanged the hybrid bond against a new one, we settled the old hybrid bond and we had a cash out of additional 11 million under the hybrid coupon. This accounts for the change here. And after the acquisition of Tondach, we have a net cash flow of 55 million, and that remains in the company. Heimo Scheich already referred to the payout ratio. The title may be misleading. All we want to communicate is what is important for us and how do we manage the company. The 130.6 million free cash flow after the hybrid coupon of 45 million gives us a free cash flow of 68.5 post-hybrid, and it's our intention to distribute between 10 and 30% of our free cash flow. Of course, always considering the liquidity position of the company and observing our financial discipline. So we're going to pay out 17.5 million in terms of dividend. That is 20% of the free cash flow. So we are within the range of 10 to 30%. Working capital development, inventories, trade receivables, and trade payables. No major changes, all in line with our guidance. Working capital, 20% of revenues at the end of the year, or 19% to be quite accurate. So we have things well under control, even though certain markets are picking up. Working capital is managed at country level because this is where we need it. You have to have stock. You have to have products on stock, otherwise you can't sell them. Total investments, normal capex, 60% of depreciation, 121 million. Growth capex, there are two projects, Pipelife USA. For 2 years, we've had a shortage of products. This is why we've extended our capacity, which meant a cash out of 5.6 million. And then Tondach Kleinstetten, which was taken over fully. We paid cash 12.5 million for the share package, and we made an exchange, Wienerberger shares against Tondach shares, in the amount of 23.2 million. So we spent 163 million either in cash or in Wienerberger shares for investments in 2014. Development of net debt, 538 million last year, up to 621 million. That is the gross cash flow, which reduces our debt compared with 2014. Then we paid a dividend. We received dividends. We paid a dividend on the results of 2013. That was a cash out in 2014. The hybrid coupon, we sort of made an advance payment of the coupon in the amount of 44 million. Then total investments, 23 million for changes in treasury shares. We used our own shares, treasury shares, to pay for the acquisition of Tondach, and then the consolidation of Tondach debt in the amount of 97 million, and then working capital and others. That is 621.5 million net debt. we still have a very strong capital ratio, equity ratio of 52% with a gearing of only 30%, and despite the impairments booked. So it's a strong balance sheet. When you look at our liquidity and the financing structure, we have a well-balanced term structure for 2015. We have a bond that will fall due in August. We have already enough cash on our balance sheet. We have the 400 million credit line for 2016, 17, and 18. Very little falling due. And then we have the hybrid bond for additional flexibility. It's been shifted. Part of it has been shifted until 2021. And the exchange of the hybrid bond, as was already communicated, we were able to shift a major part of that, which gives us additional flexibility. Now we can decide, are we going to pay out or not? It depends on the economic environment and the projects. We have a liquidity buffer of 400 million. Existing lines have been funded more favorably, and we've included an additional line for pipeline, so we will be better able to compensate the fluctuations in working capital, which is a seasonal thing. We're building up working capital in the amount of 200 to 300 million in the winter, and then we are reducing working capital. And to finance that, we need our lines because they're cheaper than long-term money, and we can save in terms of interest paid. But financial discipline remains important for us. We've been very disciplined since the beginning of the crisis, and this is still our priority. Treasury ratios, net debt to operating EBITDA 1.9 without the hybrid. The covenants are 3.5 with regard to net debt. Now it's our goal never to be above 2.5 at year-end net debt to operating EBITDA. Of course, our debt increases in the course of the year, but towards the end of the year it declines again. And operating EBITDA to interest result is something where we are also focusing on a continuous improvement. We are well above the covenant and really satisfied.
Now let's take a look at the segments. In 2014, the BRIC segment, particularly in Western Europe, was characterized by a highly varied environment. I've already mentioned that. Good market conditions in the United Kingdom, Belgium, and here we had a positive effect. A weaker environment in France, in Germany, and also in the Netherlands, and of course in Italy. So these were the characteristics of the market environment. But as you can see, through measures on the price and product sides, and as a result of our restructuring, we could achieve a plus of 19% in EBITDA. That is to say, a good performance despite a highly varied market environment. Eastern Europe, again, a very good development regarding our earnings. Of course, Tondach played a role, but also our performance in Russia, where we also had a positive contribution. So as you can see, Wienerberger in Eastern Europe, which is not a fantastic market, could achieve a satisfactory margin. When it comes to pipes and pavers, Western Europe, this has already been discussed, so I don't have to go into detail. We've heard about project business. What is important is that in markets such as Finland, Sweden and Norway, that is the big Nordic markets, we have outperformed the market. We were very good in the also in infrastructures. When it comes to Western Europe, France, a very difficult market environment, as I've already mentioned. So this is a major challenge for us. The situation was also difficult in the Netherlands in 2014, but we expect an improvement for 2015. Steinzeug showed a positive development in its overall performance. France, of course, was a weaker market, Germany was stable, and Eastern Europe was positive. Central and Eastern Europe, Semmelrock and Pipelife. Here again, we can see that we can achieve growth, and there are valuable contributions from Greece, Bulgaria, Turkey and Hungary. So positive developments in these markets. Semmelrock could gain shares in all the markets where we are present: Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic, Bulgaria. So a very good development in the operating business. And we could achieve an acceptable margin of 9%. North America, a slight decrease, which has already been mentioned, as a result of a challenging environment in Canada, Ariscraft, the facade segment, and of course there was regional price pressure on facing bricks in North America. Nevertheless, we managed, and this is very important, we managed to gain market shares. And when it comes to prices, of course, we have to make concessions here and there. So much, a brief overview of 2014 and the different segments. What is more interesting for you, of course, is the outlook for 2015. This is a slightly changed map compared with last year. The situation has changed. Let me start with the United Kingdom. There's an election year in the United Kingdom in 2015. Nobody knows what the outcome is going to be. Most likely it will be a new coalition, and this will mean a challenging political environment. We assume that the dynamic development in housing construction will continue. Growth will be less than last year, about 7% for 1- and 2-family houses. But this is a relevant market for Wienerberger, and we expect growth. After the elections, we will see what the position of the new government is going to be. Let's take a look at the continent. The Benelux region shows an improving market environment. The reason is that we had a historical low last year, and there has now been a slight upswing, about 5% in the market that is relevant for us. Belgium, the most important market in this region, is stable. France will show a further decrease in the construction of 1- and 2-family houses, but the decrease will be less dramatic than it was last year. So again, the situation has somewhat stabilized, or will stabilize, towards the end of 2015. Let's move on to the German-speaking countries, Germany, Austria, Switzerland. For the first time, Switzerland shows a slight decrease. The construction of one and two family houses has slightly gone down in Switzerland. The same holds true for Germany and Austria. So a slight decline of market activities. In Italy, again, a decrease, but less dramatic than it was last year. Remember, last year it was a double-digit decline. Now it's a single-digit decrease. And Eastern Europe shows a change in the trend in some markets. Bulgaria, for instance, it seems that the historic low is a thing of the past. So we can expect growth. Poland, the largest, biggest market in that region, had a good start last year, then it went down, then up again. So it's a very volatile market environment. Basically, we expect that positive market trends will predominate when it comes to one and two family houses. Russia, shown in red. We do not know how the Russian market is going to develop. Last year was a very good year. The market environment was positive. But, of course, we have to watch out and consider how sanctions, etc., will impact the market. So we expect the development will be positive, but there will be a slight decline when it comes to the housing market. The Scandinavian markets, of course, are very important. Pipe life, for instance, Norway more stable. Sweden shows a slight growth. Finland, a slight decrease. As I've already mentioned, despite the difficult market environment, we want to achieve growth in the various segments, infrastructure, housing construction, etc. The North American market, again, shows growth. 9% is not bad at all. It is very satisfactory. So we will have growth rates in the brick segment, but growth will be less than originally planned. You will remember the forecasts for North America. So it's a step-by-step upward development, but we do see a potential for the coming years. The renovation market in Europe, which is becoming increasingly important for us, shows a positive environment, which is important for our roof business, for pipe life. So we have growth rates in some European countries, Italy, for instance, in Central and Eastern Europe, United Kingdom. Otherwise, the market environment is stable. Regarding individual business units, in the CBM segment, we expect a stable and slightly positive development. This should mean a moderate volume increase for us as a result of product innovation and technical improvements and consultation efforts throughout the supply chain. This will also mean that we can increase prices in line with cost inflation. We expect a cost inflation of roughly 1.5% for 2015, and in order to compensate for that, we will achieve a price increase of 1%. Implementation of measures. We have a large number of individual measures in our markets, in our products in the various segments, which will contribute to our ability to grow. We will save additional energy. We will work on production processes. So there are a number of measures that we are going to implement. Tondach shows a very satisfactory development, and the contribution will be around 67 million in terms of revenue and 8 million to EBITDA. Summing up, I can say that here we expect a significant revenue and earnings increases. Pipes and pavers in Europe. As regards pipe life, we expect that the Nordic markets, which are the major markets for a pipe life, will be stable. I've shown you that Norway will be stable. There will be slight growth in Sweden, a slight decrease in Finland. But, of course, the currency devaluation effects constitute a burden on the overall result. Then project business, as Willy described, will recover. At least this is what it looks like now, and this will also contribute positively to the earnings of the company. Again, implementation will proceed in small steps. Optimization measures will focus on France and the Netherlands, but we will also work on optimization measures in other countries, and all that should contribute to a slight earnings increase in 2015. Steinzeug-keramo operate in markets where we do not have big expectations regarding growth. There will be a slight decrease of market shares here or there, but again, here we are making great efforts with our products so that we should be able to increase our earnings. So again, for this sector, we expect a slight earnings increase. North America, the brick segment, will show a better development as a result of a recovery of the market. So we expect to see higher growth rates. Prices will remain volatile because of the competitive situation in North America. As a result, the situation for prices will remain difficult. And we see a market stabilization in Canada. So altogether, a positive environment. Demand will be stable. So we have enhanced our capacities. As a result, we expect to increase our earnings and volumes. So we should achieve an EBITDA of 350 million for 2015 as a result of the market developments that I've described. The situation is quite volatile, but we feel that we can make this assessment or estimate. The contribution of Tondach should be about 8 million. Real estate sales, as Willy pointed out, go up and down, but we expect something like 10 million. I've already mentioned prices. We expect a price increase by 1% to compensate for 1.5% cost inflation. Depreciation 220 million. Interest result 50 million. Working capital could be stabilized in recent years and will be about 20% of revenue. And normal capex, investments into maintenance, renovation, improvement of the product mix, new installations will be about 140 million. So much for a brief outlook for 2015. Following turbulent years, following restructuration and reorientation, even though I don't have any figures here, I can just mention that we had to close more than 70 plants since 2009. Now we have growing business in the brick segment, and what is important, Wienerberger shows a very strong organic growth despite difficult markets. So we are well positioned for the future. Thank you very much for your attention, and of course we are willing to answer your questions. Yes, please. Dr. Scheuch. You will have non-recurrent impairments in the future as well. What about impairments from goodwill, mothballing, etc. in recent years? Could you give us any figures? And what contribution do you expect from the decreasing energy costs? Let me start with your last question. Energy costs, oil prices, this is important, have gone down. There's one thing that I would like to mention. We are not dependent on oil prices. We use gas for brick manufacturing, for brick production, and there has been a decoupling between gas prices and oil prices. So the reduction has not been as dramatic as the decrease in oil prices. Secondly, the liberalization of the European gas market, as you know, meant a decoupling from supply, delivery and logistics. And those supplying the pipelines have not reduced their prices, rather they increased their prices and will continue to do so. Regarding electricity, there was a decrease of prices, but again, it was not as dramatic as the oil price decrease. So much by way of introduction. Secondly, we have a forward buying or purchasing strategy. We might call it hedging, but this would not be absolutely correct. We purchase quantities depending on our estimates regarding production. So this year we will not see a dramatic effect because we have already purchased electricity and gas in advance. So there will be an impact, but not a huge one. Regarding impairments, Willy will give you the details. Now, all this, of course, happened before 2009. Ever since 2009, we had the following impairments. Goodwill, 240 million in between 2009 and 2014. Asset impairment, about 180 million. So these were the two big restructuring measures, 2009, 2012. And of course, there are annual impairments in the amount of about 200 million.
I have a question regarding the development of revenues in 2015. What do you expect in terms of revenues this year? Or rather, how much do you need in order to reach a 350 million EBITDA, and how much of the increasing revenues is due to the positive currency translation effect of pound sterling and the US dollar? And the second question, you mentioned optimization measures that have been initiated. Could you give us some examples of what you intend to do in the United States and in Europe? In what way do you expect to benefit from market conditions in order to reach your targets? As regards revenues, when you look at market forecasts, you can conclude that we are not forecasting a lot of growth. We expect to be within the range of 2014, of what we generated in 2014. Of course, there is the effect of the consolidation of Tondach. I never budget for currency translation effects. There are so many bankers in the room, but none of you will be able to tell me what the dollar or the pound sterling is going to do in the course of the year. If you, I never make any forecasts on that. But when you look back, that gives you a good idea. We have different currencies. We have a portfolio, and in the course of 2014, we had a relatively small impact on our EBITDA of 4 to 5 million. That is the impact of currency fluctuations. Negative, Norwegian crown, Swedish crown, and the ruble. Positive, as you said, the pound sterling and the US dollar. But the extent of fluctuations, well, when you compare the Swedish crown and the Norwegian crown, since the beginning of the year, they have picked up again and got stronger. We don't know what's going to happen. As regards the optimization measures, well, we have 208 plants currently in operation. We have optimized these locations in terms of energy consumption, management structure. We've introduced Six Sigma. We have recruited engineers from the automotive industry to make improvements in our brick plants. So if you only save 100,000 euros per location, and if you multiply that by 208 plants, it's quite a lot. And well, you have referred to positive developments in the Dutch market. Well, in the Netherlands, the level was extremely low, the lowest number of new housing starts since the end of the Second World War. And a 5% increase seems to be a lot, but it's not much at all, starting from such a low level. Of course, the outlook is positive, but as Heimo said, we're starting out from a very low level in a number of markets. But there is a silver lining, so to speak, on the horizon. The difficult markets are bottoming out, and you said that there is some hope also in France. Or there was some hope at the end of the year that markets might stabilize 2015, 2016. Well, I love France very much, but whenever presidential elections are coming up, the construction industry is picking up, and there will be elections in 2016, and stabilization measures will be taken, incentive packages will be adopted. It's an issue of the labor market, and incentives will be provided. Well, Central Europe, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, what are the main problems? Why are these markets declining? Particularly as regards single and two-family homes. Why are the volumes going down? Well, when you look at Austria and Switzerland, we can see that in 2014 in Austria, we generated substantial growth. We are gaining market shares in a weaker market. There are demographic changes in Austria, as you can see, and people are moving towards the Vienna region. Vienna is growing much faster than other regions. Rural areas are stagnating, and the towns are growing, and the amount of building material required per unit of dwelling built in towns is smaller. And that's a trend that will continue. The inflow of migrants into the German-speaking countries means that these people, they will not live in rural areas. They want to live in towns, in urban agglomerations, because they will find jobs. So we have adjusted to this trend in terms of products, in terms of distribution, and we have to deal with that. A question regarding the German market. You communicated quite openly that margins there are disappointing. Are there certain product groups that are not reaching the target or that are lagging behind in terms of margins? Could you give us an indication of the current level for such product groups? And a question about the financial results. You had a 13 million negative effect from foreign currencies. Are these mark-to-market valuations of derivatives? Where does that come from? About 50% is mark-to-market, and the remainder is losses made in terms of loans that had to be repaid, particularly in zloty. Well, when I look at the development of prices of building materials in Europe, you have what we call the Germany effect. Price structures and also earnings in Germany are lower than in other countries of Europe. You have a very tough competition in Germany. You have medium-sized businesses. You have a regional competitive structure. Competition is tough in Germany, tougher than elsewhere. So this is something you have to accept. But on top of that, we still have to catch up as far as we are concerned, particularly in clay blocks. We are well on our way with perlite filled clay blocks and mineral wool filled clay blocks. We want to increase our market shares because these products have a better margin structure, and we are moving away from the commodity sector and distinguishing ourselves from other producers, particularly in terms of clay blocks. As regards clay roof tiles, we want to sell more accessories, ceramic and non-ceramic accessories. That means our distribution organization has to be adjusted accordingly. As regards facing bricks and pavers, we have to make use of synergies with markets like Belgium and the Netherlands that overlap to a certain extent with the German market. These measures don't sound particularly spectacular, but they will have an impact on margins. And can you give us a rough indication of the margin? Below average, because if it weren't below average, we wouldn't be aiming for an improvement. Well, a word about, you referred to clay blocks, perlite-filled clay blocks, which you introduced a couple of years ago. isn't there a trend towards clay blocks without perlite filling? I don't really believe in this trend. We have an excellent pilot project, the joint venture with Schlagmann in Bavaria, and Bavaria is brick country. Bricks account for 70 to 80% of building materials used in housing construction, and the share of premium products at Schlagmann is well above 50%. So they have succeeded in changing their portfolio from simple clay blocks with a limited degree of thermal insulation. They have shifted from these clay blocks to clay blocks that provide for high thermal insulation. They are in Germany. There is a shift, or in Bavaria at least, there is a shift towards these composite structures that require no additional thermal insulation if the perlite-filled clay block is used. The 50 brick requires also offers thermal insulation, but you need a thick wall, and for a thick wall you need more space, and that means you have less usable floor space available. We are continuously improving the information that goes out to the customer, and people who can afford it, if they're well enough informed, prefer to buy a higher quality product. They will go for the Audi rather than for the VW if they can afford it. So we have a smaller group of the population that has a higher income and they want high quality products. So that is a clearly noticeable trend, and we will have to try and follow that trend in Germany as a whole. Any further questions? No, this is not the case. So thank you very much for your attendance. I'd like to thank the members of the Managing Board for the presentation. The first quarter results will be published on the 7th of May. Thank you very much.